Imagine standing in the Peruvian desert. You see nothing but dirt and rock beneath your feet. Now imagine climbing 500 feet into the air and looking down. Suddenly, a 300-foot hummingbird appears, perfectly rendered, its wings precisely aligned with celestial events that wouldn't be documented for another 1,000 years. The Nazca Lines shouldn't exist, not like this, not at this scale, not with this precision. For 1,500 years, these massive geoglyphs remained completely invisible to their creators. Invisible to everyone, in fact, until humans learned to fly. So how did an ancient culture create designs meant only to be seen from the air? And more importantly, who were they trying to signal? The Nazca Lines weren't officially discovered until 1927, when a Peruvian pilot named Toribio Mejia Cespe flew over the desert and saw something that would perplex archaeologists for generations. What he witnessed were massive geometric shapes, perfect trapezoids, spirals, and animal figures, stretching across 350 square miles of the Atacama Desert in southern Peru. But here's what makes this discovery truly unsettling. These figures had existed for over 500 years, completely invisible. Local residents living in settlements adjacent to these drawings couldn't see them. The Nazca culture itself, the civilization credited with their creation, couldn't have verified their own work, not from the ground, not without ascending into the sky. Archaeological consensus places the Nazca culture's dominance between 100 BCE and 800 CE. During this period, they became obsessed with creating massive ground drawings, some measuring over 1,200 feet across. The lines were created by removing the dark desert varnish, a coating of oxidized minerals, to reveal the lighter soil beneath. Simple technique, monumentally complex execution. The hummingbird spans 315 feet. The monkey stretches 315 feet and contains a perfectly spiraled tail. The spider measures exactly 150 feet. Every measurement precise, every angle calculated. But calculated for what? For whom? In 2020, Japanese researchers from the University of Yamagata made a discovery that shook the archaeological establishment. Over 140 previously unknown geoglyphs revealed through advanced satellite imagery and AI analysis. Some of these figures predate the classical Nazca period by centuries. What this means is that the line making wasn't a singular cultural project. It was a multi-generational obsession spanning over 1,500 years. Multiple civilizations, different eras, the same inexplicable practice. The mathematics involved in creating these designs without modern surveying equipment is staggering. Consider the trapezoids. Some reach widths of 1,150 feet, with parallel sides maintained within inches of absolute precision across those entire distances. How? Without laser theodolites? Without aerial guidance? The evidence suggests these figures were laid out using only stakes, ropes, and an uncanny understanding of scale and perspective. No scaffolding was ever found, no ramps, no evidence of elevated platforms, just dirt, lines, and questions. What's most intriguing is that certain clusters of lines, when mapped together using satellite data, create patterns that resemble actual star charts, constellations mapped with shocking accuracy. It's as if someone copied the night sky from above and transcribed it into the desert floor. Here's the central mystery that archaeological literature struggles to address. Why would the Nazca culture create elaborate designs visible only from the air? The conventional explanation, astronomical and ceremonial markers, falls apart when you ask the obvious question. If these were meant to be religious or astronomical guides for the Nazca people, why make them invisible? Why design them at scales requiring aerial perspective to appreciate? A simple stake-marked calendar at ground level would serve identical agricultural and religious purposes. But the Nazca culture rejected simplicity. They chose the impossible. The hummingbird is positioned such that it appears to hover perfectly over the desert, only from an altitude of approximately 400 to 500 feet. This altitude is significant. This is precisely the altitude achievable by hot air balloons, technology that wouldn't be documented in the Americas for another 1,400 years. Is it coincidence that the lines maintain their geometric perfection at this exact altitude? Or is it evidence of intentional design? Recent archaeological surveys have discovered pottery fragments and ceramic records that document Nazca daily life, building practices, agricultural methods, and cultural evolution. But nowhere, absolutely nowhere in these records, is there any explanation for the geoglyphs. No religious texts, no ceremonial diagrams, no preparatory sketches. It's as if the line making existed in a separate cultural realm, a parallel project undertaken with religious zeal but never directly referenced in the archaeological record. What if the Nazca Lines were never meant to be understood by ground-based archaeology? What if they represented a communication system intended for an audience above? This isn't speculation. This is the evidence suggesting a pattern so deliberate that dismissing it requires us to accept an extraordinary alternative, that an ancient civilization spent 1,500 years engaged in the most elaborate, coordinated, multi-generational ceremonial project in human history for reasons they never documented and couldn't verify themselves. The alternative is that these geoglyphs served as landing strips, waymarkers, or signals for beings with the aerial perspective to read them. Evidence supporting this hypothesis. First, the alignment of certain figure clusters corresponds precisely with flight paths. Second, the trapezoids meet criteria for runway dimensions used by aircraft designed for desert landing. Third, the scale of commitment, the sheer labor investment over centuries, suggests a purpose transcending local ceremonial needs. Fourth, the international distribution of similar geoglyphs in other cultures, Atacama Desert, Australian outback, Nazca-like figures in China and the Middle East, suggests a coordinated, possibly non-terrestrial phenomenon. The Nazca culture may have been the instruments rather than the architects. They may have been participants in a project whose true purpose remained beyond their understanding, passed down through generations as sacred duty. The lines remain. The message is still visible. The question is whether we possess the perspective to finally read it.
The ancient pilot's narrative surrounding the Nazca Lines commits several critical logical fallacies. First, it relies on argumentum ad ignorantiam. Because we struggle to explain the construction methods, the explanation must be extraterrestrial. This ignores decades of archaeological documentation showing simple tools, stakes, ropes, mineral pigments could create these designs. Second, it employs the fallacy of false necessity, the claim that aerial visibility requires an aerial audience. This ignores that many geoglyphs are partially visible from elevated local sites. Surrounding hills reach 1,500 plus feet, and that ritualistic invisibility, accessible only through specific spiritual journeys or aerial consciousness, fits known Nazca cosmology better than literal landing strips. Third, von Daniken's theory suffers from confirmation bias, selecting aerial anomalies while ignoring contradicting evidence. Nazca ceramic records document daily life, building practices, and cultural evolution over centuries. No anomalous artifacts, no technological discontinuity. Archaeological methodology requires material evidence, not speculation. The most parsimonious explanation, the Nazca culture created astronomical and ritual markers using documented construction techniques. Embedded in a cosmological worldview, we're still learning to interpret through legitimate archaeological inquiry, not by inserting extraterrestrials when conventional explanations become inconvenient.